My name is Maya, and I never imagined my whole world could unravel over polite hellos. I still remember the night I first saw his brother's shadow in our doorway. I just finished packing boxes in the living room, hands shaking, heart buzzing with excitement, and anxiety, too. Luca was late again, and I pressed my palm to my mouth to keep from calling him, from sounding desperate. But then the door clicked, and Adrian stepped in, all easy charms smoothed over guilt or worry. He said, "Thought you might need help," voice soft as silk. I nodded, swallowing so hard that my Adam's apple bobbed. My stomach fluttered, like I was standing on the edge of something reckless. He moved beside me, elbow brushing mine, and offered to carry a box. The weight felt heavier with him around. I told myself it was fine, that he was just being kind. But when he leaned in to laugh at my jokes, I caught my breath, throat locking up. My pulse hammered in my ears. I could feel my cheeks heat and my palms dampen. I wanted to pull away, but I forced a smile, because it felt wrong to doubt someone who was family. In the days that followed, Adrian was always there, showing up at odd hours, offering coffee, guiding me through IKEA instructions as though I were a fragile plant that needed extra care. He'd place his hand on the small of my back, steady and reassuring, and I'd shiver. My spine would prickle, and I'd tuck my chin to hide the tremble in my lips. I told myself it was nothing, that I was just stressed. But my dreams began to twist into whispered warnings. I'd wake with my breath caught in my throat, mattress damp beneath my back, convinced I'd heard him calling my name. Then came the night I found the note. It was tucked under Luca's pillow, a short scrawl accusing me of lies, of hiding things from him. My blood ran cold as I read it by the pale lamplight. My hands shook so violently I could barely hold the paper. My mouth went dry, bones hollowed with fear. I stumbled to the hall, pressing hand to forehead. Everything felt surreal, like a bad dream I couldn't wake from. Adrian appeared at the top of the stairs, concern flickering in his eyes. He said, "Are you okay?" and stepped closer, voice low. My chest tightened so much it hurt to inhale. I tried to speak, but the words tangling in my throat refused to come. When I forced out, "Where did this come from?" his face shifted, solemn, almost triumphant. He told me Luca had been distant, that he'd found messages suggesting I was keeping secrets. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. I realized then what had been growing quietly between us, doubt. He'd planted it, watered it, until it blossomed into this accusation. I bolted past him into our bedroom, door slamming so hard the walls rattled. My heart thundered, ribcage aching as tears welled behind my eyes. I sank to the edge of the bed, knees trembling under me. Every breath felt like glass in my lungs. I whispered his name, but the walls swallowed it. I hated that I'd let him in, that I'd smiled and trusted. I hated that my own home felt like a trap. In that moment, I vowed I'd uncover every lie, every forwarding he'd sent. I'd gather the truth in my hands and shield it like a lifeline. I wouldn't let him shatter what I'd built. My fists clenched so tight my nails bit into my palms. The rage pooled in my belly, fierce and bright, pushing back against the fear. I lifted my head, jaw set, and whispered into the darkness, "I'm not your victim." And I knew then that everything would change. I woke up to that hollow quiet again, the kind that presses in around your ears when someone you love isn't there to shake the sleep from your shoulders. I lay still for a long moment, chest tight, staring at the ceiling until the edges of the room softened in the pale light. My jaw was clenched, and I could taste the lingering sting of tears I'd swallowed in the darkness. I sat up, legs folding beneath me, and let my fingers drift over the mattress as though I could find some grain of peace in its weave. When I finally swung my feet to the floor, it felt heavy, every step a reminder of the night before, when Luca had stormed out without a word, leaving only the echo of his slammed door. My throat tightened, and I pressed my palm there, feeling the faint tremor of my pulse. I pulled on a soft sweater and padded down the hallway, each footfall muffled against the carpet. In the kitchen, I found our coffee mugs, one half full, one empty, and I cradled the warm ceramic against my ribs, as though the heat could anchor me to reality. I poured myself a cup and sank onto the couch, wrapping my arms around my knees. The morning light cast long shadows across the coffee table, where yesterday's mail still lay untouched. My hands shook as I reached for an envelope, Adrian's eviction notice, stamped and yellowed, and I nearly dropped it. Instead, I gripped it like a lifeline, tracing the bold letters with a fingertip. That eviction had been my first step toward truth, but truth felt brittle now, like it could shatter under the weight of my own doubt. My phone buzzed then, 3 messages from Chloe. I blinked at the screen. How are you holding up? Call me if you need to talk. I miss you. My chest swelled with gratitude and a fresh ache of vulnerability. I typed back a trembling, I'm scared, and hit send before I could second-guess myself. Almost instantly, her reply came, I'll be there in 20. Relief flooded me, mingling with shame that I'd let panic swallow me whole. I spent the next minutes gathering myself, brushing my hair until it fell in neat waves, slipping into sneakers, stuffing my phone into my pocket. When the doorbell rang, I opened it to Chloe's embrace, warm, firm, grounding. I clung to her like I might have clung to Luca if he'd stayed. She led me to the balcony, where the breeze tangled our hair and breathed new air into my lungs. My hands still trembled, and she wrapped her jacket around my shoulders without a word. We sat on the edge of the railing, feet dangling. Chloe's eyes were soft but resolute. Talk to me, she said. My voice caught, but I managed. I don't even know if Luca will come back. I exhaled a shuddering breath. I feel like I broke us, and I keep replaying everything Adrian whispered. My fingers dug into the railing, nails scoring shallow grooves. She squeezed my hand. You didn't break him. He left. You deserve someone who stands by you, not runs from you. I nodded, blinking back tears. The wind pushed at my sweater, and I felt a cold trickle of something fierce unfurl in my belly, clinging to life beyond fear. I need to make it right, I said. But I don't know how. Chloe stood and pulled me upright. We start small, she said. He's just hurt. He'll come around when he sees you fighting for him. Later, we wandered our street, cups of tea warming our hands. I told her every moment of doubt, Adrian's silken lies, the note under the pillow, the phone call cut off too soon. Each confession felt like peeling away another wound. Chloe listened, nodding, then gave me a look that made my heart thrum. Let's go see him. My chest thundered as we approached our building. My legs felt leaden, but determination knotted my stomach. Chloe knocked firmly on Luca's door. I swallowed, heart pounding in my ears. When he opened it, rigid and guarded, I stepped forward. I'm here, I said, voice clear despite the tremor. I'm not giving up on us. His eyes flickered, hurt, relief, something like hope, and he stepped aside. I walked in, shoulders back, ready to piece us back together, one fragile breath at a time. I found him in the little courtyard behind our building, leaning against the low brick wall where we'd once sat under string lights. His shoulders were hunched, head tipped down, and when I stepped up beside him, my heart thudded so loud I wondered if he'd hear it. I brought something, I said, voice catching. He glanced at me, eyes wary, and I reached into my bag. My hands shook as I pulled out a worn photograph, edges frayed. Proof 1, a carnival snapshot. It's us, laughing on that rickety Ferris wheel, faces lit by string lights. You were pointing at the city glow below while I held onto your arm, hair whipping around us. He took it with fingers that trembled, thumb brushing the gloss. I watched his jaw flex, and I felt a twist of hope and fear knot in my stomach. My voice wavered. Remember how free we felt, before everything got twisted? He stared at the photo, eyes softening. The creases in the paper pressed against his palm, and I could see the recognition in his gaze, like I'd handed him a piece of our unbroken past. We didn't speak for a moment, just stood in the hush of that courtyard. My mouth went dry. My palms were damp against the bag at my side. Then I tapped my phone screen and swiped to another image. Proof 2, your midnight message. You're my home, your text read, sent at some late hour when I was restless, 3 little words that slowed my racing heart. I lifted the phone so he could read it. His breath came in a soft hitch, shoulders dropping as though a weight lifted. I felt tears sting my eyes, part relief, part sorrow for all the nights I'd doubted. He looked up, voice quiet. I forgot how we used to talk. His throat bobbed on the word used. I closed my eyes, chest tightening. A mix of regret and longing buzzed behind my ribs. I swallowed, tasting bitterness and something like gratitude. I needed you to see we were real, I said, stepping closer. My hand hovered before touching his arm, then slid down to squeeze his wrist. My fingers were cold, but his skin felt warm beneath them. His eyes drifted to my hand, then lifted to mine. He exhaled, heavy and soft. "I'm sorry I ran," he murmured. His voice cracked, and I could feel his guilt radiate like heat. My lips trembled as I reached up to brush damp hair from his forehead. My fingertips left a trail of warmth, and I could feel tears roll down my cheeks. I was scared, too, I admitted, breathing catching. My body shook, limbs rigid with years of fear and hope. Scared I'd lose you if I fought back. My fingers curled into his shirt, knuckles white. "But I want us. I want us back." He closed his eyes, pressing his forehead to mine. I felt the pulse under his skin, steady like a slow drum. His arms circled my waist, weight settling me into the moment. I let myself lean in, resting my cheek against his collarbone, chest fluttering with relief and the faint tremor of lingering doubt. We stood there until the sky shifted from dusky gray to deeper shades, air growing cool. Somewhere a door clanged shut, distant voices faded. I heard only his breath and my heartbeat, learning to sink again. When we finally pulled apart, he wiped my tears with his thumb. His fingers shook slightly. "I want us, too," he whispered. I nodded, mouth too tight for words, and rested my forehead against his. In that quiet courtyard, proof of our best selves held between us, not words twisted by doubt, but memories and promises that still shone. My legs felt weak, but I stood firm with him, arms linked, daring to believe in a future where whispered smiles and midnight messages would guide us back home. That morning, I woke to the weight of yesterday's whispers still pressing against my ribs. I lay in bed, listening to Luca's soft breathing beside me, and I realized how raw my nerves still were, every exhale caught in my throat as though I was waiting for another betrayal to edge its way in. My hands were clammy when I slipped from beneath the covers, and my legs felt like lead as I crossed to the kitchen. I poured coffee into our matching mugs, one for him, one for me, and carried them to the worn love seat where we'd spent so many evenings talking through our darkest fears. I settled beside him, letting the warmth seep into my fingertips, and watched him cradle his mug like it was an anchor. He glanced at me, lips curved in a small, tired smile, and I felt my chest twist with gratitude and guilt that I'd ever made him doubt. We sat in silence, letting the steam rise between us. Finally, Luca said, "I know saying sorry isn't enough." His voice was quiet, rough around the edges. I nodded, throat tight. My fingers traced the seam of the cushion. "I need more than words," I whispered. He reached out and brushed his thumb across my knuckles, a simple gesture that buzzed through me like electricity. My hand jerked reflexively, an old habit when I'd felt threatened, and I caught his gaze. For a moment, fear and relief wrestled in my belly. Then I relaxed, letting his warmth settle me. "I was thinking," I began, voice low, "that we need boundaries." My pulse thundered as I spoke. "With everyone who tried to pull us apart." My throat squeezed, and I swallowed past the lump. No more surprise visits. No more messages shared without permission. Luca nodded, shoulders taut. He ran a hand through his hair, pulling at the strands as though loosening a tangle inside his head. "Agreed," he said. "Whatever it takes." His resolve wove into mine, and I felt a flicker of hope ignite. Later, we moved through the apartment with deliberate care, rearranging furniture, hanging fresh curtains, creating spaces that felt ours alone. Each task felt like reclaiming ground we'd lost. My back ached from lifting boxes, but the ache was good, a reminder that I was building, not just healing. When I slipped a potted fern onto the windowsill, Luca caught my elbow and gave me that soft look that spoke of shared victory. But as I straightened the leaves, I felt a shiver along my spine, like a whisper of doubt slipping through the cracks. I shook it off, blaming a draft, but the tension settled in my shoulders like an unwanted coat. That afternoon, I found myself scanning my phone every few minutes, waiting for a message from Ryan or Adrian, anything that might portend trouble. My thumb hovered over the group chat with mutual friends, wondering if anyone would stir rumors anew. My stomach churned at the thought. I closed the app, heart pounding. Luca appeared in the doorway, carrying 2 plates of pasta. My shoulders bunched, and I stared at the bowls like they were foreign objects. He set one in front of me and slid into the seat across. "Eat," he said gently. "You look like you could use it." I forced a smile and twirled the fork, chewing slowly. My jaw clenched as I swallowed each bite, tasting garlic and basil but feeling only tension. I wanted to trust that this meal was safe, but the memory of that note under the pillow flickered in my mind. After dinner, we curled up on the love seat with a blanket between us. I rested my head on Luca's shoulder, listening to the steady thrum of his heartbeat. My hands were tucked under the fabric, fingers fisting into the soft weave. I felt the urge to confess every jitter in my chest, every guilty thought that Adrian's shadow still haunted those corners. I opened my mouth to speak, but the silence held us in its fragile cocoon. That night, I slept but dreamt of footsteps in the hall, rapid, uncertain. I bolted upright, sheets twisted around my legs, heart hammering. Luca reached out, pulling me close. He murmured, "It's okay," and I sobbed quietly into his chest, trembling like a leaf in a storm. In the dawn's gray light, I resolved to face my fear head-on. I sat at my desk with blank paper and pen, writing down each anxiety, each suspicion that still pulsed through me. My hands shook as I listed moments I'd felt vulnerable, the late-night calls from Adrian, the forwarded messages, the crash of doors. Writing them felt like pulling teeth, but with every word, a weight lifted slightly. When Luca came in, I showed him the pages. He read them slowly, nodding, lips pressed together. When he looked up, his eyes were glossy. "We'll face these together," he said, and I felt tears spring. His promise felt like armor. That afternoon, I reached out to Chloe and asked if she'd stay over for the night, someone who understood every twist of this wound. She agreed, and I felt the first flicker of safety in days. As I prepared the guest bed, I realized that rebuilding trust wasn't a single moment's triumph but a series of small acts, locks changed, boundaries set, confessions shared, and the courage to ask for help. By the time we lit candles in the living room and settled in for a movie, my hands were steadier, and the lump in my throat had softened. I leaned against Luca again, feeling the steadiness of his presence. The candlelight danced across the walls, and I whispered, "Thank you for standing by me." He squeezed my hand, voice soft, "I'm not going anywhere." My heart eased, the tension in my muscles unraveling like yarn. And in that simple declaration, I felt the first true step toward reclaiming our life, one boundary, one confession, and one promise at a time. I woke to the faint hum of early morning traffic filtering through the curtains, and my chest tightened before I even opened my eyes, like I was bracing for bad news. I lay there a moment, feeling the rise and fall of Luca's breath beside me, and wondered if calm could ever feel permanent. My hands curled into fists beneath the sheets, nails pressing crescent dents into my palms. I slid out of bed, muscles stiff, and padded into the kitchen. The countertop was cluttered with yesterday's dishes, and I paused, palms flat on the cool tile. My jaw was locked, my lips tasted of last night's tears. I hovered over the coffee maker, thumb flicking the switch. The hiss and sputter felt like a heartbeat, mine catching, then jolting into motion. I poured a mug and held it against my chest like armor, feeling its warmth seep through my shirt. Luca appeared in the doorway, hair mussed, eyes cautious. He offered a gentle smile, careful not to startle me. "Coffee?" he said. I nodded, and he filled a second mug, setting it beside mine. I wrapped both hands around mine, shivering even without a chill. He stayed where he was, leaning against the frame, watching me settle at the small table. I woke up thinking, what if I overreacted? I whispered, voice raw. My fingers traced the ring Luca had pressed onto my hand weeks ago, still slightly too big, but a promise nonetheless. My shoulders hunched as I stared at the table. Maybe I'm still so keyed up that every shadow feels like Adrian's footsteps. My throat caught, I swallowed hard, tasting bitterness. Luca slid into the chair across from me, lifting his mug in a small toast. "You're not overreacting," he said, voice low. He reached across the table and brushed his thumb over my knuckles, and suddenly the tremor in my arms faltered. I closed my eyes, pressing my forehead to my hand, and let out a shaky breath. My back ached from sleeping curled against suspicion, and I realized I'd been carrying fear like a second skin. Later, I decided to tackle something I'd been avoiding, the study closet where I'd hidden all the evidence against Adrian. My heart thudded as I turned the knob, breathing catching in my throat. The door creaked open, and I blinked against the dimness. Shelves crowded with old files, journals, notebooks. I stepped inside, the floorboards groaning under me. I found the box labeled "Proof," pulled it onto the floor, and sank beside it. My fingers trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside were printed messages, eviction notices, journal pages inked with doubt. Each one carried its own sting, a reminder of how close Adrian had come to unraveling us. My throat tightened, vision swimming with heat and ache. I dug through the pages, laying them out on the floor in a jagged line. My breathing hitched, heart pounding like a drum. I pressed a fingertip to a text where Adrian had twisted a joke I'd made into proof of my instability. A wave of cold fury washed over me, sweat beading at my hairline. My scalp pricked, my jaw locked. I shoved the papers aside, the stack tumbling back into the box with a dull thud. My palms went slick, and I wiped them on my jeans. I sat back, leaning against the shelf, legs drawn up. My breath came in ragged bursts. I realized I'd reached the point where exposure wasn't enough. I needed to let it go. Not by tearing the pages to shreds, but by acknowledging that they no longer held power over me. The evidence had served its purpose. Now it was time to step out of the shadows they'd cast. I stood, gathering the box in my arms. It felt heavy, weighted with memory. I carried it to the door and set it down in the hallway. Luca met me there, eyes curious. Without a word, I lifted the box into his arms. His brow furrowed, but he didn't ask. Instead, he followed me outside. We walked down the hall to the dumpster area, the box balanced between us. My heart pounded, like a lobotomy of fear and resolve. I opened the lid, feeling the cool rush of early light mix with the musty air. Together, we tipped the contents in. Papers fluttered like wounded birds before sinking into darkness. I pressed my palm to the side of the box, letting the emptiness echo through me. When the last sheet fell, I closed the lid with a definitive click. Luca slipped an arm around my waist, drawing me close. I leaned into him, chest thumping against his side. My knees went weak, but his grip was firm. I felt tears gather, not of sadness, but of release. I pressed my cheek to his chest, inhaling the steady rise and fall of his shirt. Back in our apartment, the air felt lighter, like the room exhaled with us. I poured fresh water into a vase and filled it with wildflowers we'd picked on our walk. Their petals bright against the glass reminded me that life could bloom after storm. Luca placed his hand atop mine as we set the vase on the table. "I think I'm ready," I whispered, voice thick. Ready to stop looking over my shoulder. He smiled, nodding, his thumb stroking the back of my hand. "We'll do it together," he said. My chest eased, a soft exhale of hope. As the flowers caught the afternoon light, I felt the proof of our strength in that simple bloom. No pages, no notes, just us and a promise to keep moving forward. That evening, I sank onto the balcony, the city lights twinkling like distant stars. My shoulders sagged at the weight of everything I'd discarded, and I hugged my knees, breath coming in slow waves. Luca joined me, setting 2 mugs of tea on the low table. The steam curled upward, carrying the scent of chamomile and mint. I wrapped my fingers around the mug, feeling its warmth seep into my palms. My jaw was slack with relief, but beneath it trembled a shadow of old doubt. He leaned back against the railing, eyes on me. "How are you feeling?" he asked, voice gentle. I studied the rim of my mug, tracing a chip in the glaze with my thumb. "Light," I admitted, voice soft. "But also, fragile." The word tasted honest against my tongue, and I let my fingers tighten around the ceramic. I could feel tears prickling, but I blinked them away, unsure whether I was crying from hope or leftover pain. We sat in silence, the only sound the distant rumble of traffic and a soft breeze sifting through the plants. My heart fluttered when a moth brushed my arm, and I murmured an apology to it. The odd sensation reminded me how unsettled I still felt, half afraid that calm would shatter at any moment. Luca nudged my shoulder. "You're safe," he said, a simple promise. I took a sip of tea, warmth flooding my chest. The flavor was soothing, grounding me in the present. My hands stilled, and the tremor eased. I looked at him, seeing the steady lines of his face, the way his hair caught the light. A slow smile curved my lips. "Thank you," I whispered. He nodded, lips curving in return. Later, I slipped into my sneakers and walked to the corner market for fresh flowers. The sun had dipped low, painting the sky in bruised pinks when I arrived. I chose pastel hydrangeas and bright sunflowers, their petals wide open as if smiling. The vendor wrapped them in brown paper, and I carried them home like a declaration: life goes on, beautiful and bold. Back in our apartment, I arranged the flowers in a vase on the windowsill. The colors caught the afternoon light, casting soft reflections on the wall. Every time I passed by, I paused, fingertips grazing petals. I realized I'd been neglecting small joys, moments of color amid the gray. The flowers reminded me that growth didn't need drama, it just needed nurturing. Inside, Luca was cooking dinner, garlic and olive oil sizzling in the pan. The aroma filled the apartment, rich and alive. I leaned against the doorframe, hands on my hips, and watched him move. My chest tightened with affection. The simple domestic rhythm was a balm. I opened the window above the sink, letting the evening air swirl in. He glanced over, eyebrows raised. "Want to help?" I nodded and reached for a wooden spoon, stirring pasta sauce in time to his movements. My hands were steady, each stroke confident. It struck me how ordinary the scene felt, and how precious that ordinariness was. No schemes, no hidden agendas, just two people making a meal together. After dinner, we curled up on the sofa under the soft blanket I'd uncovered earlier. I rested my head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. My body relaxed into the rhythm, and I thought about all the fierce battles I'd waged, internal and external. The adrenaline had faded, replaced by a softer strength. My eyelids grew heavy, and I murmured, "I never want to take this for granted." He kissed my forehead. "Neither do I," he replied. That night, sleep came easily. I dreamed of light fields under endless skies, colors swirling without fear or edge. In the morning, I woke with a sense of renewal, like stepping into clean air. I stretched, body loose, and glanced at Luca sleeping beside me. I pressed a kiss to his cheek, and whispered, "Good morning." We began the day with hot coffee and lazy smiles, planning a weekend trip to a quiet lakeside town. The idea of new scenery thrilled me, fresh horizons that held no shadows. As I packed a small bag, I felt excitement settle in my belly. The past might always linger, but it wouldn't define where I was going. Before we left, I paused by the front door and looked back at our apartment, every planted fern, every canvas, every page waiting to be filled. I inhaled deeply, craving the promise of what lay ahead. Then I turned the key, stepping outside with Luca hand in hand. Together, we walked toward the car and the next chapter, hearts light enough to soar. We arrived at the lakeside town under a sky painted in soft pastels. The car engine's hum faded as we pulled into the driveway of the little cottage we'd rented, its wooden porch worn smooth by time. Luca cut the engine and turned to me, eyes bright but cautious, as though still checking for the ghosts that used to linger behind me. I reached for his hand and squeezed, wanting to tell him I was here now, free of old fears. Inside, the air smelled faintly of pine and old linen. I dropped my bag by the front door and kicked off my sneakers, relishing the give of the hardwood beneath my feet. The living room had a stone fireplace and windows that framed a view of the lake's glassy surface. My chest lifted with a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I moved to the window, pressing my palm against the cool glass. The water stretched out, untroubled, and I felt something settle in my bones. Luca joined me behind my shoulder, draping his arms around my waist. He rested his chin on my shoulder, and I could feel the steady warmth of him. "This is perfect," he whispered. I nodded, voice thick with relief. "It feels like a new beginning." My fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt. I closed my eyes, letting the gentle scent of his soap mingle with the pine. We spent the first morning exploring the shoreline, shoes in hand, toes sinking into soft sand. The lake lapped at the edge in tiny waves, and I scooped a handful of water, watching it filter between my fingers. My hands were steady, no tremor, just the weight of cool liquid and sunlight on my skin. Luca stood beside me, legs spread for balance, camera in hand, capturing moments I knew I'd want to remember. We wandered to a small dock where a rowboat was tied. I hesitated, heart flickering with a strange mix of excitement and fear. What if something went wrong out on the water? But Luca offered me his hand. I took it, and he helped me step in. As he pushed us off, I felt the boat glide forward with the lake's current, gentle and sure. I leaned back, eyes on the sky as cotton clouds drifted. For a few breaths, I let myself believe I had nowhere else to fear. Later, we picnicked on a plaid blanket under a willow tree. I unpacked sandwiches and fruit, hands moving with ease, no second thoughts. We laughed at silly jokes, the kind that taste like sunshine. I noticed how my sternum relaxed, ribs expanding in a way that felt new. At one point, Luca caught me staring at him and gave me a goofy grin that made butterflies flutter in my stomach. I realized I was smiling without effort, maybe for the first time in months. In the afternoon, we rented bicycles to circle the lake. My legs pumped the pedals, muscles awakening with each push, carrying me smoothly along the path. The wind whipped my hair, and I laughed out loud. I glanced back at Luca riding ahead, then turned back to the view, wildflowers nodding at the roadside, treetops whispering secrets. The old tension was a distant memory, a faded echo. As dusk fell, we returned to the cottage for a cozy dinner by the fireplace. I chopped vegetables for soup, my hands moving steadily, soup simmering with soft scents of rosemary. Luca set out bowls and ladled the steaming broth. We ate slowly, savoring each spoonful, warmth spreading from our bellies to our hands. The fireplace crackled, embers glowing red, and I felt a deep comfort settle around us like a blanket. That night, I stepped outside onto the porch and breathed in the crisp air. The stars were bright, and the lake was ink black, reflecting pinpoints of light. I leaned against the railing, jaw unclenching, breath deep and steady. Luca came out, wrapping me in his arms. My body relaxed against him, any lingering jitter of fear letting go. We stood in silence, listening to the night's lullaby, water softly lapping, leaves rustling, distant owl calls. In that moment, I knew my heart had room for both memories and new beginnings. Betrayal had left scars, but here I found renewal. I whispered into his shirt, "Thank you for today." He pressed his lips to my temple and murmured, "Always." And under that canopy of stars, I felt the promise of tomorrow shine as brightly as every star above. That morning, I woke to the faint buzz of my phone on the nightstand, the kind that made my heart flip before I even saw who it was. I lay there with my eyes closed, breath fluttering against the sheet, imagining headlines and hidden motives. Luca was still asleep beside me, sweatshirt rumpled across his chest, and for a fleeting second I longed to press my back into him and hide from the world. But I forced myself up, letting my feet slide into slippers as though training against panic. I went into the kitchen, hands trembling as I cradled a mug of coffee, its warmth barely cutting through the knot in my stomach. The aroma rose in a lazy swirl, bitter and familiar, and I closed my eyes, tasting relief and tension in the same sip. My legs trembled against the cold tile, and I pressed the mug to my forehead, letting the heat anchor me. My phone buzzed again, a calendar reminder for a work trip I'd agreed to weeks ago, and my pulse skipped. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over decline or accept, heart pounding so loud I thought Luca might hear it from the bedroom. I shouldn't have signed up for a conference now, not when my nerves were raw and every heartbeat felt like a countdown. But I remembered how he'd set boundaries with me, how he'd promised to stand with me. I tapped accept, exhale catching in my chest like a sob, and sent him a message, "I'm going to be gone a few days." He texted back almost instantly, "I've got you. Let's do a video call every evening." His words glowed on my phone, and I felt both relief and guilt swirl together. I knew he'd worry, and I wondered if I'd regret leaving that comfort bubble we'd built. I packed a carry-on in the guest room, folding clothes with shaking hands. Each shirt felt like a promise I was stretching, each toiletry a token of independence tinged with unease. The next night, I sat in a generic hotel room and stared at the blank wall before me. My suitcase lay open, its contents half unpacked, and the air smelled of stale carpets and recycled ventilation. I fumbled with the remote, flicking through the news headlines as though I could spot danger before it arrived. My palms were slick on the armrest, jaw tight, and I realized I missed home like a missing limb. Then I tapped his contact, sweaty thumb pressing to start video. His face filled my screen a moment later, soft light behind him, that familiar half-smile. My chest fluttered and I swallowed hard, trying to catch speech. He said, "How's it going?" and I noticed his eyes held concern, damp in their corners. My throat was dry, and I whispered, "It's okay." His image flickered slightly, like a lifeline shuddering in the tide. I closed my eyes, inhaled, and told him about the conference, about the cramped seat on the plane, about how I'd nearly cancelled. He listened, nodding, and pushed the screen away to show me his hands. "I made us a playlist," he said, voice low. "Something calm." I blinked back the tears that stung, throat tightening as relief and gratitude tangled. The next moments were filled with music, the gentle guitar strum, soft piano chords, a voice humming somewhere between lullaby and promise. I pressed my thumb to the speaker icon, volume low enough to fill my chest without drowning out my thoughts. I closed the call feeling lighter and sank onto the bed, hands pressed to the mattress. My legs felt wobbly, and I let out a soft laugh at how I doubted my own strength. I picked up the playlist on my phone and set it to shuffle, letting the songs wrap around me. My breathing slowed as the melodies settled behind my ribs, and I realized that bravery wasn't the absence of fear, but moving forward despite it. I curled into the pillows and let sleep take me, heart echoing a quiet promise to return strong. I landed back at the apartment that evening, eyelids heavy, suitcase rolling behind me like a reluctant companion. The hall light was dim, and I paused before inserting the key, heart fluttering, breath catching in my throat. For half a breath, I braced for something wrong, a note, a silent house, any sign that calm had crumbled. But the door swung open smoothly, and Luca stepped into the threshold, arms spread. Relief flooded me, so strong it chased the tension from my limbs. I let him hold me, forehead pressed against his chest, listening to the steady drumbeat of his heart. My hands curled into the fabric of his shirt, nails just grazing skin. The rainy scent in the air reminded me of storms I'd weathered, inside and out, but in that moment it felt like a fresh start. I inhaled deeply, tasting the warmth of home. He led me inside, flicking on soft lights. I kicked off my shoes and sank onto the couch, palms pressed flat, as though grounding myself against the world's edges. Luca handed me a mug of lavender tea, his creation, he said, a blend meant to soothe. I wrapped my fingers around it and felt its warmth seep into my wrists, easing the ache in my shoulders. "I missed you," he said, settling beside me. His voice was gentle, a balm. My throat thickened. "I missed you, too," I whispered, voice raw. My jaw ached from relief and something like pride. I'd done the trip, proved I could trust myself away from our bubble, and come back intact. We talked in low tones as rain tapped at the windows, filling the room with its steady rhythm. I told him about the conference, the presentations, the forced small talk, the nagging thought that everyone was watching me, waiting for me to falter. He listened, nodding, thumbs tracing lazy circles on his mug. When I described how I'd trembled presenting in front of strangers, he reached out to squeeze my hand. "You were brilliant," he said, voice firm. I closed my eyes, swallowing. It felt like walking a tightrope, I admitted. One gust of doubt and I'd fall. My palms dampened. He brushed a stray hair from my face. "And you stayed balanced," he replied. "Even when the rope swayed." Later, I drifted into the bedroom to unpack, my suitcase open on the bed. I pulled out a stack of notes from colleagues, kind words about my talk, invitations to collaborate. My chest lifted at each line. I laid them on the nightstand by my journal and flipped back through pages where I'd scrawled fears. "I'm not good enough. They'll see I'm unstable." Seeing the transformation from doubt to praise made my pulse hum with something like wonder. That night, sleep came easily, but I woke before dawn, heart fluttering with a familiar restlessness. I dressed quietly and slipped onto the balcony with a mug of tea. The sky was pale, light bleeding in. My palms slid along the railing, and I let the chill anchor me. Beyond the glass, the city stretched, softened by mist. I remembered how I used to grip the balcony edge, eyes wild with fear. Now, I stood by Luca's side, breath even, waiting for sunrise instead of dread. He joined me, hair damp from the shower. His hands slid around my waist. "Can't sleep?" he asked softly. I shook my head, sipping tea. "Just thinking." My shoulders dropped. "About how far we've come." He nodded, lips curving. "We've come so far." His hand brushed mine on the railing. A gust of wind stirred the ferns we'd planted, leaves brushing against my leg. I thought of how we'd built this life, one boundary, one confession, one step at a time. The memory of dragging that box to the dumpster still made my stomach twist, but now it felt like proof of strength, not shame. As the sky brightened, I felt a spark of gratitude so fierce it made tears prick my eyes. I turned to Luca, chest fluttering. "Thank you," I said, voice catching. "For believing in me." He pulled me closer, forehead touching mine. "Always," he whispered. We stayed like that until sunlight warmed the balcony boards. I leaned back against him and realized that courage wasn't a single act. It was a collection of mornings like this, choosing warmth over fear, partnership over solitude. And in that quiet glow, I understood that betrayal's echo might always linger in a distant hall, but here, in the gentle light of home, it could no longer find me. That morning, I woke to soft light filtering through the curtains, but my chest was tight with the weight of thoughts I hadn't yet named. I lay there for a moment, listening to the faint hum of the city below, and felt the tremor in my hands as I reached for my phone. I'd promised myself I wouldn't check messages before coffee, but a notification from Chloe made my thumb flick the screen too fast. She'd sent a photo of our old friend group chat, everyone planning a small gathering at her place that night. My stomach fluttered. I hadn't seen most of them since everything happened. Part of me wanted to hide under the covers, but another part felt the pull of community I'd missed. I typed back a shaky, "Count me in," then stared at the screen, pulse pounding so sharply I could almost hear it. In the kitchen, Luca was already brewing espresso. The machine hissed and clanked, and I braced my hands on the counter, letting its vibration steady me. He glanced over, concern softening his eyes. I leaned against him, drawing in the smell of coffee and reassurance. "I'm going to Chloe's tonight," I said, voice low. He nodded, wrapping an arm around my waist. "You don't have to go if you're not ready," he murmured, lips grazing my hair. I shook my head, heart hammering. "I need to," I whispered. The day felt long, each minute tethered to the gathering. I worked from home, fingers dancing over the keyboard while my mind ticked toward the evening. My ribs ached from shallow breathing, and I caught myself repeatedly stretching, as though detaching tension from my torso. I drank tea in measured sips, counting calms in and calms out. By late afternoon, the jitter in my calves had settled into a dull ache, and I realized I had to move. I changed into a dress I felt safe in, soft fabric, gentle color, and stared at my reflection until my breathing evened. When I rang the doorbell at Chloe's, my knees buckled for a second before I caught myself. She flung the door open with a grin, stepping back so I could enter. The apartment smelled like cinnamon and pine from the candles lining the mantel. Friends clustered around the living room, laughter spilling against the walls. I froze in the hallway, chest fluttering, throat dry. Chloe slipped an arm around me. "You're here," she said softly. The hug she gave me was firm, protective. I let her guide me forward. I greeted each friend with a quick, trembling smile. Some faces were bright with surprise, others looked relieved. I caught a few glances, sympathy shadowed with awkwardness, but no judgment. I made my way to the kitchen, accepted a glass of wine from a mutual friend, and let the warmth flood my chest, loosening the tight coil of nerves. As the evening stretched on, conversation drifted from work to silly memories of our college days. A friend passed around a board game, and I joined in, laughter bubbling up when I lost spectacularly. Every time I felt old doubt tug at my sleeve, "They still think you're fragile," I reached for Luca's text at the back of my mind, "I'm proud of you." It steadied me like a tether. Later, Chloe nudged me. "Want to share?" she mouthed. I realized everyone had paused, waiting. My cheeks warmed, heart hammering, but I drew a breath and stood in the center of the circle. I spoke softly about what had happened, soothing words turned sour by betrayal, the long road to trusting again. My voice quivered when I described the fear that still visited me, but with each sentence, I felt the tension draining from my shoulders. When I finished, the room held its breath. Then a friend said, "Thank you for sharing," and someone else passed me a tissue. They didn't pity me, they honored me. I felt tears sting my eyes, but they weren't shame, more like gratitude. I realized I was safe here. On the walk home, the cool night air brushed my cheeks. My legs felt steady beneath me, each step a small victory. Luca waited by the door, key in hand. He pulled me close, pressing a kiss to my temple. I rested my head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of reassurance. "You were amazing," he whispered. My chest softened into a sigh of relief. Inside, I slipped out of my shoes and padded to the living room, where our plants cast soft shadows in the lamplight. I touched the leaves of the fern, a silent witness to everything I'd endured and overcome. In that quiet moment, I understood that healing wasn't a straight line, but a series of steps, boundaries set, confessions spoken, connections rebuilt. And tonight, I'd added one more, the courage to stand in the center of a circle and own my story. That morning, I woke to the dull ache of anticipation settled behind my ribs, like a bruise I couldn't ignore. I stretched in bed, fingers grazing the edge of the comforter, and felt Luca's arms slip around me without conscious thought. His warmth was a tether, but my body still hummed with unease, like I was waiting for something to tip the balance. I rolled onto my back, jaw clenched, and stared at the ceiling as the pale light shifted. My mouth went dry, and I forced myself to inhale deeply, letting the air flood my lungs, slow enough to steady the tremor that rattled my limbs. I slid from the bed and padded to the kitchen, sweat prickling at the back of my neck. The kettle hissed as I filled it, and I leaned my forehead against the cool cabinet door, feeling the grain under my skin. Coffee barely mattered, I needed ritual, something reliable. When the water boiled, I cradled my mug, steam warming my fingers, and blinked against the sting of tension. I sipped slowly, tasting bitter clarity. Across the table, Luca watched me, eyes soft but unreadable. I wanted to show him I was okay, but the doubt that Adrian's last email might have contained another trap coiled inside me. A ping on my phone jolted me upright, an email from an unknown address titled "Final Word." My pulse thundered. I tapped it open with shaking thumbs, an anonymous message alleging that Luca had secretly been reaching out to Adrian's sister, that I wasn't the only one who'd been betrayed. My vision swam, chest tightening so sharply I thought I'd collapse. I dropped the phone, palms slapping the table, nails digging into wood. The world tilted. Luca was beside me in an instant, pulling my hands into his. "What is it?" he asked, voice taut. I gasped, words tangled in dread. Someone's accusing you of going behind my back." I rasped, throat raw. His brow furrowed, eyes narrowing as he bent to read over my shoulder. The email was vague, no proof, just insinuation smeared with venom. I felt bile rise in my throat, and my hands curled around the mug until my knuckles whitened. He tossed the mug aside, porcelain clattering. I flinched, heart slamming. He peered at me, jaw tight. "Did you get anything else?" His voice was low, urgent. I swallowed, mouth parched. "Just this." I thumbed through the email again, each sentence dripping malice. My chest felt squeezed, warmth pooling at the back of my eyes. I realized Adrian's shadow still lingered, infecting our fragile peace. Luca reached out, fingertips grazing my arm, gentle, grounding. "Ignore it," he said, but his jaw twitched. He sounded unconvinced. My stomach pitched. I could still feel the sting of his earlier doubt. This felt like a blow. "It's probably her," I whispered, voice trembling. "She's angry I cut them off." But uncertainty flickered in my gut. I'd thought we were past all this. I fled to the balcony, slamming the door behind me. The city lay below, indifferent. I pressed my forehead to the glass pane, palms splayed. My breath came quick, shallow, fear drumming in my ears. I could almost hear Adrian's grin, echoing through the email. I slid down to the floor, knees drawn to my chest, and wrapped my arms around them. My body shook, tears burning my lashes. I hated that he still wielded weapons of doubt. After a few minutes, Luca's shadow fell across the glass. He knelt beside me, voice soft, "Hey." I pressed my cheek against my knees, stifling a sob. He slid an arm around my shoulders. "Let's call her," he suggested. "Get it cleared." I nodded stiffly, heart still racing. He stood and offered his hand, and I took it, letting him pull me up. Inside, he fished out his laptop and pulled up the sister's contact, an address he'd saved for emergencies. My palms were slick, and I bit my lip. We typed a brief message together. We received a disturbing email. "Did you send this?" His fingers hovered before hitting send, a moment of shared resolve. I felt the heat of fear give way to something like determination. We waited in the kitchen's hush, the kettle's hiss conspicuously absent now. The email ping came seconds later, a curt apology from the sister, blaming a prankster friend. She swore she'd never accuse him and asked us to delete the message. Relief broke through me like sunlight. I exhaled, shoulders sagging, and Luca pulled me close. My body went limp against him, breath rattling out in shaky sobs of release. He rocked me gently, whispering, "It's over." I clung to him, shaking. The doubt had cut deep, but revealing the lie was its own catharsis. The betrayal attempt had failed. I felt tears slide down, but this time they were purification rather than fear, liquid proof that I could face the echo and survive it. Later, we stood on the balcony again as dusk settled, holding mugs of tea. My hands stilled around the cup's warmth. Luca's arm around my waist felt like a fortress. I leaned into him, letting the world blur behind us. The city lights shimmered like distant promises. I realized that no matter how many shadows Adrian and his allies tried to cast, our truth would always shine through, because we'd chosen it together. That afternoon, I found myself restless, circling through the apartment like I was trying to outrun a memory. My hands itched, craving the phone to check for any sign of another threat. I caught Luca watching me from the couch, concern furrowing his brow, and I stopped with my foot hovering over the hallway threshold. My heart was jittery, half relief that nothing had come, half dread that something would. I collapsed onto the edge of the bed, fingers tracing the quilt stitching. My jaw felt locked, shoulders tense. I wanted to break something, shatter the silence with something real. But all I had was this pulse pounding in my ears. I took a shaky breath, throat dry, and forced myself to reach for my journal. The pages were blank since yesterday's crisis, but I needed to spill the residue of tension somewhere. My pen hovered before I wrote. I feel like I'm waiting for a storm that may never come. Even writing the words made me flinch, they tasted too true. My hands shook as I added lines about phantom footsteps in the hall, about sweat beading at my hairline when a door slammed. The more I poured out, the lighter my chest felt, like each confession peeled away another layer of fear. When I looked up, Luca was there, leaning in the doorway. His smile was soft, but his eyes held questions. I slipped the journal closed and tucked it under my arm. "I'm okay," I said, voice ragged. He nodded, but he didn't step away. Instead, he came forward and wrapped me in a hug that felt like coming home after wandering too long. I leaned into him, feeling the slow ground of his chest under my cheek. Later, I retreated to the balcony with my sketchbook. My pencils lay scattered on the table, and I rubbed two together, eyelids fluttering as I stared at the blank page. I was itching to capture something, maybe the way shadows pooled in the corner of our living room, or how the light bent around Luca when he stood there. My fingers finally found graphite and I sketched the curve of his shoulder first, then the line of his jaw. Each stroke felt deliberate, precise, and it grounded me as the world hummed around. When I finished, the drawing was rough but honest, a silhouette of him looking out across the balcony. The hair was a messy line, the jacket collar just a suggestion. I felt a small spark of pride, like I'd crafted a talisman against fear. I tucked the sketch into a notebook and stood, letting the pages flutter closed. That evening, we shared dinner in the kitchen, pasta with fresh tomatoes and basil. My hands moved without second-guessing, stirring sauce, tearing leaves. Luca chatted about his day but paused when he saw the look in my eyes. I stopped stirring and met his gaze, mouth half open. He tilted his head, waiting. I swallowed, then said, "I think I'm finally done waiting." My voice wavered. He set down his fork and reached across the table, thumb brushing my knuckles. "Done what?" he asked, and I realized I'd blurred the words. I took a breath. "I'm done letting the possibility of betrayal shadow everything." My shoulders eased. "I want to start making plans, real plans, not ones haunted by what might happen." The air between us felt charged, like promise before the storm. He smiled and nodded, eyes shining with relief and pride. "Let's do it," he said. "What do you want to plan?" I pictured the blank wall in the living room, still waiting for art or photos. "I want to frame that sketch," I said, voice firmer. "And hang it where I can see it every day." My chest warmed at the thought. We cleared the dishes and carried the sketchbook to the study. I found a simple frame in the closet and slid the paper inside. The glass caught the light, and I felt a thrill at holding something that bore my fear and my triumph. I carried it to the living room and held it against the wall where the old eviction notice used to hang in my mind. Luca helped me nail it in place, each tap of the hammer echoing like a beat of reassurance. When it was straight, I stood back. The silhouette looked out at us, silent and unafraid. I felt my breath slow, shoulders releasing the last tension. Luca wrapped an arm around my waist and kissed my temple. "Perfect," he murmured. That night, as we curled up under the blanket, I realized that the real reckoning had been the one I waged inside myself. I had faced the echoes, the phantom threats, the stale air of suspicion, and I'd chosen to reclaim my space. In the quiet dark, I let sleep come, trusting that neither betrayal nor fear could find me behind the glass of that frame, where my own hand had drawn strength into existence. I woke to a knock at the door, gentle, insistent, like a heartbeat echoing in my chest. My stomach fluttered with old unease as I slipped from bed and padded across the floor. Through the peephole, I saw Chloe's face framed by early morning light. Relief and anxiety tangled in my throat. I opened the door, and she stepped inside, hand outstretched with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "Thought you might need this," she said, voice warm. I took a mug with trembling fingers and wrapped my hands around it, warmth seeping through my palms. She stepped in, closing the door behind her. The apartment felt too quiet, too safe, and I realized how much I'd come to rely on that safety. We settled at the kitchen counter, Chloe pouring cream into her coffee. I watched the swirl deepen the color. My chest eased a little, but the old jitters still lingered at the edges of my awareness. "Big day today?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. I nodded, echoing her question in my mind. I'd agreed to host a small art show at a local cafe, my first public display since everything happened. The thought made my heart pound. Yeah, I said, voice tight. I'm showcasing the series I painted here. The one with sunrise colors. My fingers tapped the counter, nervous beats. I'm terrified, but I want to do it. Chloe smiled encouragingly. You'll be amazing. People will see your strength in those canvases. Her confidence radiated like sunlight catching the table. Later, I packed my tote with 3 canvases: Lavender Rose Dawn, Golden Burst, and Deep Blue Horizon. My hands shook as I carried them to the cafe, each step a test of resolve. When I walked in, the owner greeted me, guiding me to a blank wall. I unwrapped the first piece, heart hammering as the cloth fell away. The painting glowed under the track lights, a field of soft hues dissolving into warmth. A small crowd gathered as I adjusted the frames. My chest felt tight, breath shallow. Chloe slipped in beside me, pressing a reassuring shoulder against my arm. I straightened, hands hovering over the last piece. The final canvas was the boldest, strokes of sunlit yellow colliding with calm blue, a testament to facing fear head-on. As the show opened, patrons drifted in, murmuring appreciations. A woman touched the deep blue horizon and said, This speaks of storms and peace." My throat tightened. I nodded, pressing my lips together to hold back tears. I realized that each brushstroke had been a step away from doubt. A friend approached and asked if I'd share my story. My pulse thundered, but I took a breath and began. I once thought my trust would be my undoing. But painting helped me reclaim my power. My voice wavered, but the crowd leaned in. I spoke of betrayal, of fear, of each canvas as a battlefield where I'd fought ghosts. When I finished, the applause was soft but sincere, the kind that lifts your chest instead of pressing down. After the crowd thinned, I gathered my things, heart still fluttering. The owner handed me an envelope, payments and notes of praise folded inside. I gripped the envelope like a lifeline, feeling gratitude bloom. Walking home, I carried the memory of each compliment like petals in my hands. The sky was turning gold at sunset, and I paused on the sidewalk, tilting my face upward. My shoulders uncoiled, and I let the breeze graze my cheeks. I'd stepped into the light, and the shadows I feared had no purchase here. Back in the apartment, I arranged the envelope on the counter and pulled out a single note. "Your art gave me hope." I pressed it to my heart, breath hitching. Luca appeared then, silhouetted in the doorway. He crossed to me, sweeping me into a hug. My tears came then, warm and unashamed. He held me as the last light of day faded outside. I realized that courage wasn't just surviving, it was standing in front of others and letting them see your scars as beauty. In that quiet dusk, I felt the echo of betrayal fall silent, replaced by the steady rhythm of my own reclaimed heartbeat. That morning, I woke to the weight of yesterday's triumph pressing against my ribs, like I'd filled aching hollows with something raw and fragile. I stretched across our bed, every muscle humming with relief and unease. Luca was still asleep beside me, breathing deep and even, and for a moment I longed to curl back into his warmth and hide from the world. But my phone buzzed on the nightstand, sharp and insistent, and I knew I couldn't ignore what might be waiting. In the kitchen, I cradled a mug of coffee, hands trembling as I scanned my screen. There it was, a comment on a blog post about my show, calling my work self-indulgent and suggesting I traded on my pain for attention. My stomach convulsed, and I felt bile creep up my throat. I set the mug down with a clatter and pressed my palms to my cheeks, jaw clenching so tight that I tasted copper. How could one stranger's opinion feel so like betrayal? I fled to the balcony and sank onto the bench, notebook open on my lap. The morning air was cool, bracing. I scribbled, "I feel exposed again, fear tangled with anger." Each word was a small confession, peeling away panic. My lungs filled as I wrote through the ache, and for a moment the tension loosened. Luca stepped onto the balcony and slid beside me, shoulder brushing mine. He glanced at my journal, worry softening his eyes. "What happened?" he asked. I closed the notebook, voice trembling. Someone called my art a gimmick. My throat went dry. He wrapped his arm around me. "You're not defined by one comment," he whispered. His warmth was a tether, but I still felt the sting echo in my chest. Inside, I paced the living room, mind racing. I thought of ignoring it, letting cruel words slide into silence. But I also wanted to reclaim my voice. I grabbed my laptop and drafted a response, calm, honest, acknowledging hurt but refusing to shrink. My fingers hovered over the post button as my pulse thundered. Then I clicked send. The response appeared beneath the criticism, a small beacon. My heart hammered, breath caught. An hour later, Luca and I headed to the studio for a casual meetup. My legs felt leaden at first, doubt whispering that everyone would judge me now. But when I walked through the door, faces lit with greeting, I sensed kindness rather than scrutiny. A friend pulled me into a hug and said, "I read your reply." That was brave. My chest swelled and tears pricked my eyes. We spread out canvases on tables, lavender rose dawn, golden burst, deep blue horizon. As I adjusted my painting under the light, I felt the old ache of vulnerability flare, then settle into steady resolve. Across the room, someone complimented the depth of color in my sunrise piece. I met their gaze, voice sure when I said, "Thank you." I needed to stand by what I created. We spent the afternoon painting side by side. The scent of acrylic and wood filled the air as brushes danced. Each stroke felt purposeful, a reclaiming of space in my own skin. By the time we packed up, my breathing was calm, every exhale a small victory over the panic that lurked beneath. That evening, I checked the blog. My reply had garnered supportive comments, shared stories of others who'd faced cruel feedback and refused to let it win. The harsh words still hovered, but they no longer had the power to topple me. I closed the laptop with a soft click and leaned back against the couch, letting relief ripple through my limbs. Luca came over and slipped an arm around my shoulders. I rested my head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "You did great today," he murmured. My lips curved into a small, genuine smile. The fear was still there, a quiet echo, but it had lost its edge. I realized that vulnerability would always invite risk, but it also held the possibility of connection and growth. Later, we sat on the balcony under a sky dusted with stars, mugs of tea warming our hands. I pressed my cheek against Luca and whispered, "I'm proud of us." He kissed my temple and replied, "Always." The city lights shimmered below, and in that gentle glow I felt a truth I couldn't deny. No matter how many shadows tried to reach me, my response, calm, honest, unwavering, would always shine through. That night, I lay awake listening to our apartment settle around me, every creak and sigh echoing like a secret. My heart kept shimmying against my ribs, half expecting a ghost to slip through the door. I rolled to my side and pressed my hand to the blank canvas leaning by the window, the one I'd planned last week. Running my fingers over its smooth surface, I felt its promise, fresh, vulnerable, daring me to fill it. I sat up and dragged the canvas to my easel, knees creaking as I stood. The studio lights were cooled from before, but I flipped them on anyway, bathing the room in soft glow. My breathing caught as I uncapped the tube of titanium white paint, the bristles of my brush waiting. I dipped the brush and made the first stroke, a slash of light across emptiness, feeling a jolt of something electric. My shoulders tensed and then loosened as color bloomed, each stroke a pulse of reclaimed confidence. Somewhere in the hall, I imagined Adrian's whisper, but it was drowned by the rhythm of my brush. Luca appeared in the doorway, silhouetted in light, and I paused with paint dripping from the tip. He crossed the room quietly, hands in pockets, watching the first shape emerge. My hands trembled, jaw tightened, but he offered a small nod and stepped back. That gesture felt like a standing ovation in an empty theater. I lost myself in the motion, swaths of cobalt melting into rose, edges diffusing like dawn's first breath. My chest rose and fell in sync with each arc, the ache of fear dissolving into creative pulse. After a while, my throat went dry and I swallowed, wiping sweat from my brow. I laid down the brush and studied the canvas, a field of light and shadow converging in a horizon line. It felt like the story of every trembling moment I'd faced, captured in paint. I sank onto a stool, back aching, and let the ache settle into pride. Luca set a steaming mug beside me, herbal tea laced with honey. I cradled it, warmth seeping through to my core, steadying the last frayed edges of doubt. He stood behind me, hands brushing my shoulders, anchoring me in the moment. I closed my eyes and let the breath wash through me, tidal and sure. When I opened them, the room felt expansive, safe, and mine again. Later, we leaned into the couch, legs tangled under a blanket, and spoke in whispers. The painting stood in its corner, luminous and silent, testament to survival. Luca's voice was low when he said, "You've done the bravest thing." My lips trembled at the words, and I felt tears slip free. "It wasn't the painting," I whispered, voice thick. He tilted my face and met my gaze. "Then what?" I paused, breath hitching, and replied, "It was choosing myself." My fingers found his, and I squeezed, releasing months of trembling hope. Outside, a breeze rattled the window, but inside, peace pulsed between us. I realized that betrayal's echo could never penetrate these walls again. I'd built a fortress of paint and promise. And in the quiet afterward, I knew I was whole, unafraid of any shadow that tried to follow me home. In the stillness, I dared to dream of our future: art fairs on sunny weekends, late-night walks along empty streets, paint-splattered mornings spent side by side. I pictured filling our walls with new stories, each brushstroke a reminder of how far I'd come. The apartment felt warm around me, each potted plant and canvas a chapter in our shared journey. Luca squeezed my hand and whispered that he believed in every step I took, and I believed him. Together, we rose from the couch, hands entwined, and walked to the painting, tracing its edges with gentle fingertips. I pressed my cheek against the cool glass of the frame and let the memory of every trembling moment wash behind me. The final act of my story was being written right there, in the glow of our reclaimed sanctuary. And with that thought, I knew the echo of betrayal had finally faded into the canvas, leaving only light.